You look for team members who, add complementary expertise, who add value to the team. But then, of course, you also need to incentivize them not only by paying cash. Cash is anyhow scarce commodity in startup companies. I think I mentioned before, in a startup, cash is king. So very often, for certain, let's say, high-level leadership people, especially also if they come from larger pharma companies, you need to reserve some equity, which means some participation in the company for those leadership people. So where you reserve about 10 to 15%, so in Europe, very often 10% is the upper limit, but ideally from kind of the founders and management side, it would be nice to grant a little bit more percent of or reserve a little bit more percent of the equity for leadership team members, management team members, stakeholders, but also employees in the company. And this, in my view, should go, and one should consider every person in a startup company to participate, because everyone has to put in energy, ideas, ingenuity into a startup company, because there is not a kind of completely self-perpetuating system already in place on, I think you mentioned, what is the process of innovation? Where's your R&D department? I mean, everyone is kind of innovative in a startup company. And it's always my expectation that I will not stop people of being innovative simply because they have a certain position in the company. So everyone potentially can bring in their ideas, their expertise. And that goes to an experienced technician, someone who actually works as a lab aide in the laboratory and has an idea how to improve a certain process. So, so you need to find good people in the leadership. Then from the leadership team, you have to find a good operational team, from scientists to technical experts, then also to functions in the company that you need, from administration, finance, human resources, that fit with the philosophy of a startup team. But then at the same time, you need also to incentivize them. And of course, for critical positions, you have to give them a little bit more of the equity, and for maybe less critical positions, a little less. And there are tax experts, legal counsels, investors know very well how you should distribute the 10 or 15% of equity that you can distribute among your team members, so that everyone feels fairly treated. And if people feel fairly treated, then I think you have a committed team. Well, how do you guide the team members, and how do you incentivize them giving their best, by leading the team? And here, I think I mentioned this before, I'm a very big advocate for leading by example. I mentioned before that the element of respect to everyone is very important for me. Transparency, openness, appreciating each team member's input and also opinion, and having a management style which is really integrative and not authoritative. I think we are working in an industry, high-tech industry, and this is not only for biotech, but let's say in a high-tech industry where we have highly intelligent people who have academic degrees or special expertise levels. I don't think that you can achieve a lot if you boss people around and tell them what they have to do and micromanage them. So if you want to leverage their expertise, their experience, and to be as innovative as possible, you have to give them guidelines. You have to give them kind of a certain room to maneuver. You involve them in the planning process. It's not that you basically define everything for them and that they don't need to think about what they have to do. I think this is all high tech. If you want to get the best out of your team, you have to get them on board. You have to listen to their advice. So this is clearly an integrative management style. But of course, you cannot create complete anarchy. So you cannot basically let everyone do whatever they like. One has to kind of provide the guidelines, and then as a member of the leadership team and management team, one has to calibrate this and kind of communicate to the team members where we have made progress, where things are not going exactly according to plan, and how this can be adjusted, and sample a lot of input from the team. So sometimes I say, well, as a CEO, founder of the company, you're the chief communication officer. And this is not for outside communication, also inside communication in terms of transparency, the planning, and getting everyone on board. So, yeah, it's a lot of talking that is involved and convincing people that we are on the right track and that we are in this together and not somebody is providing the path and the others simply blindly follow. I think this is not something that will work in the long run. I think it's most important that when you integrate a new team member or you hire a new team member, that person fits personality-wise into the team. It should, on the other hand, not go to the extreme that, I mean, everyone has the same character, because then there's no controversy at all. But let's say if there's a character trait with a candidate that is absolutely incompatible with the team members, and I mean, there are many things, I don't want to be specific here, but if something is really where the team members say, well, that person doesn't fit in our team, I think he's just looking for him or herself, or is not a team player, or is not able to adjust, then you cannot overrule that sentiment in a team, and then you have to look for another candidate. That said, I think qualification, of course, is important. The qualification has to be sound. Also, what I usually look in a candidate is that, I mean, there's a certain excellence also in the grades of certain topics. So if you have a student that just barely makes it each and every time, well, there's maybe an issue there that person is not self-motivated to get it to a certain point. And this in a company, of course, is detrimental if you have someone who, well, cannot perform to a certain quality or level. So this is kind of the technical quality. But most important, I think, is then that there's a certain common basis of values. And I don't want to be specific here, but if somebody has totally different values that are opposite to what we have as company values, then it would not be a good fit for the team. It's not always possible, 100%, but I always try to make the effort that for new hires, be it leadership positions or, let's say, technical expertise or any kind of function that we bring into the company, we involve the entire team. Probably if then the company gets too big, you have to involve the department where that team member is active, to involve everyone in the decision-making, whether we take that person on board or not. And if there's one person who has doubts about, well, the character of the person or the fitness of that person for the team, the person will not be taken on board. So each person's and team member's opinion is taken into account when making a decision about hiring of a person. So I always made an effort, which is quite a bit of effort actually, to, well, have long interview rounds with everyone around in the company. Of course, if you have a team of, let's say, 8 or 10 people, technical experts, you can then bundle the interview and basically say, well, you 5 people meet with this person for 1 hour, and then, I mean, you let me know how it went, and then this will be considered in the final decision. Yeah, I always ask a question. Well, where does the candidate see him or herself in a couple of years' time? Because that tells you whether they have a little bit a game plan for themselves, whether they want to, let's say, depends on the position that they are applying for, whether they fit for this position. If I look for someone where we need someone with a particular technical expertise and who can do certain things, and the person just, well, wants to get into a leadership position as quickly as possible or change the field of which they're working in, then this is not a good candidate for a particular function. If we are looking for a leadership position to fill, then you want to have someone who has a vision of how to grow a company, how to develop him or herself into, well, acquiring certain leadership skills, etc. So personal development of the company as a whole. Always try to extrapolate into the future what the person thinks that they can achieve in this particular function, what their plans are in the future, and whether this is then compatible with what the company wants to achieve as a whole. There can be surprises if you ask that question, and then you see, oh, this guy wants to do something totally different, wants to get out of the lab as quickly as possible, or wants to not do administration or whatever. So it's quite interesting to hear a little bit, where people see themselves in a couple of years' time. Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of things that, of course, I think are very important to kind of weld the team together, and really making it a team. One is that you have to do certain retreats once in a while. So larger team retreats at least once per year, usually with a social component, with an overnight stay. I mean, this can be occasionally stressful for team members who are more introvert and don't like to socialize so much. But my experience always has been that retreats with the entire company, where there's, well, a certain training program, or let's say program, also information of each team member from kind of what I always say, maybe the captain's deck, in telling them where we are currently going, what the challenges are, and maybe then also giving people a little bit insight about areas of company development that maybe not every technician is used to, like financing, fundraising, developing business, creating partnerships. So giving every person in the company a little bit the feeling of where the company is heading. So having an information exchange on, what is the organization they are working in, on one hand, but then also having, of course, certain team building events. I think very nice is if you do things like shooting with arrows, or doing something where you build sub teams. And I mean, we built igloos and one time, and tried to make them as pretty and nice as possible, and afterwards destroyed them together. Everyone likes to play, and you kind of learn a little bit how to interact in a playful manner. Having a social component in these retreats. But you always have to maintain also regular team meetings, in which you inform the entire team about where the company is heading. We often call this town hall meetings, whole company meetings, so that everyone feels, well, sufficiently informed how they are kind of part of the process of building a company. And then in addition to this, you ask for processes. Of course, one has to install certain human resource processes, which involve, I mean, if you have certain milestones and objectives for a particular business year, or for, well, the company as a whole, you have to break them down into manageable sub-steps and sub-goals for certain team members. And I think I mentioned that before. You have to entrust and also empower people in the company to take over responsibilities, and actually then, well, educate their own team members in relaying the information, how we want to build the company. So that not everything comes from management. Of course, this is also necessary to have these whole company meetings, the town hall meetings, to inform everyone where things are going. But then having, well, also regular meetings with individual, well, let's say line managers, people in the organization, that then actually have the meetings with their own staff and their own team members, and you fully empower and entrust them in kind of saying, well, look, I mean, we have this goal, you have to contribute to that goal. That kind of goal-setting process then cascades further down in the organization, and the team leaders in the team then are empowered to actually have their own meetings with their team members to kind of see who is then, what kind of goals can be pursued with each person individually, but not it is in a way in a top-down fashion, but I would say in a limited top-down fashion, because in each step along the way, there is a calibration and kind of a discussion with the team members. Well, does it make sense? Is this achievable? We can only make realistic goals. And if something is totally unrealistic, it needs to be escalated all the way up to the investors, the board of directors, the management. And then also, well, trying to help people achieve these things, because simply telling them they have to do this or that without giving them the resources and the empowerment and also the means in achieving the goals is, of course, clearly unfair. So you need to kind of work with everyone to basically say, well, if we have that goal, what kind of resources, infrastructure do we need? Is this achievable in the time that we are given, or do we need to break this down to other goals? It's a lot of communication that you have to do as a leader in the company. I mean, if you come into your company and lock the door of your office, and you come out at 8 o'clock in the evening and you're not telling anyone what is going on, you will lose your people. So it's about transparency, openness, communication, making realistic planning and goals, getting the feedback from the team, and trying to cascade this down through the organization. This is my mantra of how to lead companies, and having clear processes involved so that everyone knows how this works, and nobody is surprised. I think if you discover that a team member, after you have taken that team member on board, is really not a good fit and something is really incompatible, which could not be foreseen, I have learned that it's much better to very quickly address this, talk to that person, and basically say, look, this will be an uphill battle for you. It's not useful for anyone in the company. And rather than to go separate ways in a way that is fair and okay for everyone. In my first company, I tried to make things fit. It doesn't work. That has been my take-home message from now 20 years in the industry. It's rather the selection, and if you do this with many team members involved, the probability that everyone is on the wrong tree is very low. So it's a high likelihood that you get the right person. But if for whatever reason it turns out there is an incompatibility, or someone is constantly creating or making trouble and it's not compatible with the team, well, there's no choice, right? Either you lose your team or you lose this one team member. So then you lose rather this one team member, and then it's a little more harmony again in the team. Yeah, so this has been a little bit my learning, that one should act quickly and very transparently in such situations where it just doesn't fit.